Have you ever wondered why some people never question anything, not in a dramatic, rebellious way, but in the quiet, almost invisible moments of life? Watch closely. A child raises their hand to ask a question, then pauses, not because they forgot what they wanted to say, but because something inside them hesitates. A subtle glance toward authority, a silent calculation. A question forms and then dissolves before it ever reaches the surface, and you realize something unsettling. This isn't ignorance. This is conditioning, because children are not born like this. A child in their natural state is something dangerously close to a philosopher. They ask why without fear. They challenge without hesitation. They explore without permission. They don't care if a question is inconvenient. They don't care if the answer makes others uncomfortable. They simply want to understand. But slowly, almost gently, something begins to change. The questions become fewer. The curiosity becomes cautious. The boldness becomes restraint. And one day, without anyone noticing the exact moment, the child who once questioned everything becomes the adult who questions nothing. And here is the part most people never stop to consider. You are not watching people think, you are watching them repeat. Repeat opinions, repeat beliefs, repeat behaviors they never consciously chose, as if their entire personality is an echo of something older, something inherited, which leads to a far more uncomfortable realization. If people are not born this way, then someone taught them to become this way. And the real question is not why people don't think. The real question is who taught them to stop. We like to believe that most adults are intelligent, not necessarily brilliant, but at least capable of thinking for themselves. After all, they hold jobs, they raise families, they navigate the world with a certain level of competence. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Functioning is not the same as thinking. And what we often call intelligence in society is actually something far more superficial. It is the ability to adapt, to follow rules, to say the right things at the right time, to blend in without causing friction. In other words, what society rewards is not independent thought, but social conformity disguised as intelligence. A truly intelligent mind does something very different. It questions, it doubts, it resists easy answers. It feels uncomfortable with certainty, especially when that certainty is shared by everyone else. But this kind of thinking is not celebrated. It's inconvenient, because a person who questions deeply doesn't just question ideas, they question systems, traditions, authorities, even the unspoken rules that hold society together. And that makes people uneasy. So instead, a quieter definition of intelligence is promoted, one that sounds reasonable, even responsible. Be realistic, don't overthink, that's just how things are. These phrases are not guidance, they are limitations. They are the invisible boundaries placed around thought itself. And the most dangerous part, they don't sound like oppression, they sound like common sense. This is how a certain kind of stupidity survives, not loud, not obvious, not chaotic, but calm, confident, and completely unaware of itself. It doesn't scream ignorance, it whispers certainty. It convinces people that thinking deeply is unnecessary, even foolish. And over time, something strange begins to happen. People stop examining their beliefs. They stop asking where their ideas came from. They stop noticing that their thoughts are not truly their own. They inherit opinions the same way they inherit habits, quietly, unconsciously, without question. And eventually, they begin to defend those inherited ideas as if they discovered them themselves. This is the illusion of normal intelligence, not the presence of thought, but the absence of questioning. And when people who have never truly questioned anything begin to raise children, they don't just pass on knowledge, they pass on their limits. We like to believe that children are taught through words, that values are explained, that beliefs are chosen, that identity is built through guidance and instruction. But if you watch closely, you begin to see something else. Children don't learn primarily from what is said. They learn from what is lived, from tone, from reactions, from what is allowed and what is silently discouraged. A child doesn't need to be told to fear judgment. They see it in the way their parents hesitate before speaking, in the way they seek approval, in the way they avoid standing out. And slowly, without a single direct lesson, the child absorbs the same fear. This is how the mind is inherited, not through teaching, but through imitation, not through logic, but through exposure. A child enters the world open, unpredictable, full of raw potential. But the environment around them is already shaped, predictable, structured, conditioned by years, sometimes generations, of unexamined patterns. And so the child adapts, not consciously but automatically. They begin to mirror what they see, the way their parents react to stress, the way they handle disagreement, the way they respond to authority. Even the questions they don't ask become part of the inheritance. And here is the unsettling part. Most of what you believe you did not choose, your fears, your sense of what is normal, your understanding of success, failure, respect, even love, much of it was absorbed long before you were capable of questioning it. You didn't sit down and decide what to believe. You watched, you repeated, you became. And because this process is silent, it feels natural. It feels like this is just who I am, but it isn't. It is who you were shaped to be. And the shaping doesn't come from cruel or malicious people. It comes from ordinary individuals, people who were shaped in the exact same way. People who never stop to ask, is this actually true or is it just familiar? So the cycle continues. Not out of intention, but out of unconscious repetition. And by the time the child grows old enough to think independently, the foundation is already set. Their thoughts feel like their own, even when they're not. Which raises a deeper, more uncomfortable question. If the mind is shaped this early, then what exactly is being passed down? By the time a child begins to understand the world, the rules are already in place, not written anywhere, not formally taught, but deeply enforced. These are not rules of behavior. They are rules of thinking, and once they take hold, independent thought becomes almost impossible. The first rule is simple: obedience over understanding. A child is told what to do long before they are told why. Sit down, be quiet, do as you're told. At first it makes sense. Children need guidance, but something subtle happens when this pattern continues without question. The child stops trying to understand and starts trying to comply. Authority replaces curiosity, and over time a dangerous reflex is formed. When someone in power speaks, you stop thinking. You obey. The second rule is more disguised: fear of judgment presented as ambition. You are told to succeed, to achieve, to become something respectable. But beneath that encouragement, there is an unspoken pressure. Don't fail, don't embarrass yourself, don't fall behind. So the child learns something deeper than ambition. They learn that their worth is conditional, that approval must be earned, and slowly they stop taking risks that might expose them. They don't pursue truth. They pursue acceptance. The third rule is even quieter: emotional suppression disguised as strength. Don't cry. Don't be too sensitive. Control yourself. The child learns that certain emotions are unacceptable, that being fully expressive is somehow wrong, so they adapt. They hide parts of themselves. They filter their reactions. They perform what is acceptable. And over time, they lose contact with their own internal signals. They no longer feel freely. They feel appropriately. And finally, the most dangerous rule of all: the crowd is always right. Consensus becomes truth. If everyone believes something, it must be valid. If everyone agrees, it must be correct. And this destroys the very foundation of independent thought, because thinking often requires standing alone. It requires disagreeing, doubting, risking rejection. But a child raised to trust the group will always hesitate before trusting themselves. And so something tragic unfolds, not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, consistently. A mind that could have questioned everything learns to question nothing. A person who could have stood independently learns to seek permission. And by the time they reach adulthood, thinking no longer feels natural. It feels uncomfortable, unnecessary, even dangerous, because deep down they've been taught a simple truth: it is better to be accepted than to be right. And this is how thinkers disappear, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they were trained not to use it. At some point, the conditioning becomes invisible, not because it disappears, but because it becomes normal. And this is where the real trap begins, because once a person no longer feels controlled, they stop questioning what controls them. This is what Nietzsche described as the herd, not as an insult, but as a pattern, a psychological reality. The herd is not made of weak people. It is made of ordinary people doing what feels safe, moving in the same direction, believing the same things, repeating the same ideas, not because they carefully examine them, but because everyone else is doing the same. And here is the uncomfortable truth: most people do not follow the crowd because they are convinced. They follow the crowd because they are afraid. Afraid of being wrong, afraid of standing alone, afraid of being rejected. Because human beings are not just thinking creatures, they are social creatures, and belonging feels like survival. So the mind makes a quiet trade: truth in exchange for acceptance. You don't say what you really think. You say what is safe to say. You don't question what feels off. You ignore it because no one else is questioning it. You don't follow your own conclusions. You follow what has already been agreed upon. And over time, something subtle but powerful happens. You begin to confuse familiarity with truth. If something is repeated enough, it feels right. If enough people believe something, it feels unquestionable. And this is how the herd maintains itself, not through force, but through pressure, not through punishment, but through the threat of exclusion, because the herd doesn't need to silence you. It only needs to make you feel alone when you disagree. And that feeling is often enough to make people abandon their own thoughts. This is why independent thinkers are rare, not because thinking is difficult, but because standing alone is. And here is where it becomes even more unsettling, because the same people who fear the herd often become its enforcers, without realizing it, especially when they become parents. By the time most people become parents, they believe they understand the world. They believe they know what is right, what is safe, what a good life should look like. But rarely do they stop and ask a more uncomfortable question: did I choose these beliefs or did I inherit them? Because parenting, for most people, is not a conscious act. It is a continuation, a repetition of what was done to them with slight variations. And beneath all the advice, discipline, and guidance, there is one dominant force driving it all: Fear, not obvious fear, not panic or anxiety, but a quiet, persistent concern about the future. I just want my child to be safe. I don't want them to struggle like I did. I want them to fit into the world. And on the surface, this sounds like love, but if you look deeper, it is control disguised as protection. Because safety in this context does not mean truth. It does not mean freedom. It does not mean authenticity. It means acceptability. Be acceptable to society. Be acceptable to authority. Be acceptable to the system that already exists. And so, without realizing it, parents begin shaping their children not into individuals, but into versions of what the world will tolerate. They discourage risk, not because risk is always harmful, but because it is unpredictable. They discourage questioning, not because questions are wrong, but because questions create instability. They discourage difference, not because difference lacks value, but because difference invites judgment. And beneath all of this lies something even deeper: projection. Parents do not just teach their children how to live. They pass down their unresolved fears. The fear of failure becomes pressure to succeed. The fear of rejection becomes pressure to conform. The fear of being misunderstood becomes pressure to stay silent. And the child, without knowing it, inherits not just guidance, but limitation. Because fear does not create strong individuals. It creates careful ones, people who measure every step, who avoid uncertainty, who prioritize safety over truth, and eventually, people who no longer ask what is real, but what is allowed. And this is where the real damage begins. Because a person shaped by fear may survive in society, but they will never fully exist within themselves. At first, obedience looks like success. The child listens, follows instructions, performs well in school, stays within boundaries. They are praised, called disciplined, responsible, well-raised, and over time, they learn something dangerous. That approval comes from compliance, so they continue. They choose the right path, say the right things, make decisions that align with expectations, and from the outside, everything looks fine. But inside, something begins to erode. Because a life built on obedience comes with a cost, a quiet one that doesn't appear immediately. It shows up later, in hesitation, in overthinking, in the inability to make decisions without validation. Because when you are trained to follow, you never fully learn how to choose, and this creates a strange kind of existence. A person who appears confident, but constantly seeks reassurance. A person who achieves but feels disconnected from what they achieve. A person who is accepted by everyone but unknown to themselves. And then slowly, something even deeper begins to surface. A feeling that is difficult to explain. Not sadness, not anger, but a kind of emptiness, as if something essential is missing, because deep down they sense it. They sense that their life has been shaped by expectations they never questioned, that their choices were influenced long before they were made, that their identity is not entirely their own. And this realization doesn't come all at once. It appears in moments: a career that feels meaningless, a conversation that feels forced, a success that feels strangely hollow, and eventually, a quiet, unsettling thought emerges: is this really what I wanted, or just what I was taught to want? This is the hidden cost of obedience, not failure, but disconnection. Not rejection, but the loss of self. Because they were never encouraged to become a person, they were shaped into a role. And roles can be performed perfectly, while the person behind them slowly disappears. But not everyone disappears completely. Some people begin to notice, and once you notice, you can't unsee it. Not everyone stays asleep inside the pattern. Not everyone remains comfortable inside the role they were given. Every once in a while, someone notices. At first, it's subtle, a feeling that something is off, a quiet resistance to what everyone else accepts so easily, a sense that the answers you were given don't fully answer anything. You try to ignore it. You try to adjust to fit, to silence the discomfort. But it doesn't go away, it grows. Because awareness, once awakened, does not return to sleep. And this is where the real divergence begins. The moment a person stops blindly accepting and starts quietly questioning, not loudly, not rebelliously, but internally, they begin to observe: why do people believe what they believe? Why do certain ideas feel untouchable? Why does disagreement feel like danger? And slowly, the illusion begins to crack. They start to see patterns, repetition instead of originality, fear disguised as certainty, confidence built on unexamined assumptions. And this realization creates distance, not physical distance at first, but psychological distance. Conversations begin to feel shallow, opinions begin to feel recycled, social interactions begin to feel like performances. And with that distance comes something most people try to avoid: loneliness. Because when you start seeing differently, you stop belonging in the same way. And this is why most people never go this far. Not because they lack intelligence, but because the cost of awareness is isolation. To think independently is to risk standing alone. To question deeply is to risk being misunderstood. To reject illusions is to lose the comfort they provide. And yet there are those who continue anyway, not because it feels good, but because it feels true. They begin to form their own conclusions, to trust their own observations, to accept that clarity often comes without approval. This is the beginning of something rare, not perfection, not superiority, but self-authorship, the ability to shape your own mind instead of inheriting one, and this kind of person cannot be created through comfort. They are formed through tension, through contradiction, through the friction between what they were taught and what they begin to see. And once that process begins, there is no going back. There is a comforting myth people like to believe, that independent thinkers are simply born that way, different, gifted, naturally resistant to influence, but the truth is far less romantic and far more demanding. Thinkers are not born, they are formed, and not through comfort but through friction. A mind begins to think for itself the moment it is forced to confront something it cannot easily accept, a contradiction, a failure, a moment where reality does not match what it was taught to believe, and instead of turning away it stays, it questions. This is where most people retreat, because questioning creates uncertainty, and uncertainty feels like losing control. But for the emerging thinker, uncertainty becomes the beginning of clarity. They learn something most people never do, that not knowing is not weakness. It is the first step toward truth. And this process requires experiences most people are protected from. Failure without immediate rescue, disagreement without forced resolution, loneliness without distraction. Because these moments force a person inward. They remove external guidance, they strip away easy answers, and in that absence, something begins to develop, an internal compass, the ability to evaluate, reflect, and decide without constant validation. This is why overprotection creates fragility. A child who is shielded from discomfort becomes an adult who cannot tolerate it, but a person who learns to sit with confusion, to endure doubt, to survive being wrong, becomes capable of something rare, independent thought. And here is where the shift becomes personal, because this is no longer about parents, or society, or the past. It is about you, because at some point, whether you were raised to think or not, the responsibility becomes yours, to question what you believe, to examine what you've inherited, to decide what remains and what must be discarded, because no one can do that part for you. And if you don't, you will continue thinking thoughts that were never truly yours. At some point, the question stops being about your parents. It stops being about society, about conditioning, about what was done to you, because there comes a moment, quiet but decisive, when you realize something uncomfortable. No one is forcing you anymore, and yet you are still following, still hesitating, still seeking approval, still thinking within boundaries you never consciously agreed to. And that is when the real responsibility begins. Because the past may explain you, but it does not excuse you. You may have inherited your fears, your beliefs, your limitations, but you are not required to keep them. And this is where most people stop. Because breaking away from conditioning is not dramatic. It is not a single moment of rebellion. It is slow, uncomfortable, often invisible. It means questioning ideas that feel natural, letting go of beliefs that once gave you certainty, standing by conclusions that others may not understand. It means facing the same fear that once shaped you and choosing differently. Because the truth is, becoming yourself is not about adding something new. It is about removing what was never truly yours, the borrowed opinions, the inherited fears, the automatic obedience, and what remains is something most people never fully encounter. A mind that thinks clearly, a person that chooses consciously, an identity that is not performed but lived. But this comes at a cost. You may lose approval, you may outgrow people, you may feel alone in ways that are difficult to explain. Because when you stop moving with the herd, you also stop being protected by it. And yet, there is a different kind of stability that begins to emerge, not from agreement, not from validation, but from within. A quiet certainty, not that you are always right, but that you are finally thinking for yourself. And in a world where most people are repeating what they were taught, that alone is rare. Because the real tragedy was never that you were raised to obey. The real tragedy would be spending your entire life never realizing you were meant to think.